Okay, we'll get started. And first, I'll open with the opening prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given to us. Thank you for safe journeys here and safe journeys to go home. Ask that you be with us this day. Be with all of us in here and be with those that are in need of your healing touch and comfort. Ask that you be with our good friend and regular Dan Wilcox, who's still in the hospital. He was, for those of you who don't know, he's been a frequent member here, participant in this morning session for years. Just be with him, Father. Be with our church as we go into the new fall season. Be with our elected officials, help them to make wise decisions with your guidance. Ask that you be with us this day. Amen. And good morning. I have just one announcement, unless the second one comes back to me. As we go through the fall, some travel schedules get in the way of my attending here, so there will be 2 sessions that I will not be here. So with that, I would like a volunteer, and it would be one of our lady friends who have coming. You know, we've migrated from years ago of a Tuesday morning men's group to Tuesday morning men's and women's fellowship group. We used to have only 1, maybe 2 ladies that attended. Last week it was 50-50, right on the nose, which is wonderful. Wonderful to have the participation of a mixed group. And so if one of you ladies would like to take the mic for those 2 times I'm gone, just let me know. I think it's the second Tuesday in October that I'm gone, and the second Tuesday of November, I think it is, that I'm gone. So just let me know. Anybody can volunteer for it, and you can have the pleasure of opening and calling the meeting to order. It's a simple job. Lynn will help with the technology if needed. She helped me when we first got started, taught me the routines of how to get this thing going and how to troubleshoot a few things. So that's where I learned it. I did not know it automatically. So that's my announcement for the day. And Anne, if you would come forward and introduce our speaker for the day. And thank you for making the arrangements.
Thank you. Good morning, all. Can you hear me?
Not exactly.
Okay, thank you. As most of you know, I volunteer at Longwood Gardens. I've been volunteering for 26 years now, longer than you've been there. But I met Jim, of course, volunteering in the conservatory, and I was always very much amazed at how much he knew about Longwood and the way he presented the new Longwood as a wonderful ambassador. So when I thought of having someone from Longwood here, I thought immediately of Jen. So now he sent me a background, okay? So here's what he said. I've been with Longwood Gardens for 22 years, working in guest services as a tour guide and as a guest services associate, helping folks find their way around the estate. I specialize in the history of the property and the history of Pierre and Pont and his family. The tours I give cover all areas of the gardens, including the main fountain garden, open air theater, conservatory, and the estate house. Before I come into Longwood, I worked in broadcasting, and you'll know that by his voice. And was on the air as a radio personality for nearly 50 years. He also worked as an actor, and he's been seen in dozens of movies and TVs over the years. And during my radio career, I took time out to work a year in Capitol Hill as a congressional press secretary. Anyway, without anything else, the floor is yours, Jim.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much, and good morning. How nice to see you. It's carrying, huh? Yeah. Well, it's so nice to be here with you and finally see the inside of the church. I've been driving by here since the church was built. I've seen a lot of progress here and it's just a lovely place. So it's nice to be back. We're going to be talking about the history of Longwood today, and there will be plenty of time for questions a little later on. So think up those questions and let us begin. To begin the Longwood story, we're actually going back to France in the late 1700s. Let me make sure I'm pressing the right button here.
Well, left dash over here.
Is that it?
No.
Oh, that isn't it. Oh, that's the one.
This one, right side, I mean.
Oh, very good.
Just like thinking.
So this gentleman is Pierre S. DuPont the First, the patriarch of the family. He's the gentleman who brought the DuPonts from France to the United States. It was the colonies back then. Pierre the First was a member of the French Parliament. He was an economist, and he was economic advisor to the king. But his politics were a little on the liberal side. And France was coming into the age of Napoleon, getting very conservative. So he decided it would be a good time to move the family. So in late 1799, they sailed for America. It was a very difficult voyage, too. It took 93 days to cross the North Atlantic. Then they finally landed in Newport, Rhode Island on January 1st, 1800. The ship was so late, the people who were going to meet them on the dock thought the ship had sunk and they had left. So they unloaded everything. All their luggage was sitting there in a big pile on the dock. And they're wondering, what do we do? We don't speak English. So, and they were very hungry. So they wandered down the street and they found a house which was deserted. The family had gone to church. And dinner was laid out on the table. So they sat down and they ate it. They left money on the table to pay for it, but that was their introduction to the new world. So then they wanted to decide on a family business and find a location for the family business. Before they left, Pierre the First had written to his good friend Thomas Jefferson. And he outlined his plan to come to America and set up his own kingdom in America. And Thomas, to his credit, wrote back and said, it's not quite how we do things here. So they decided to do a family business. So they looked around for land to set up the family business. And they also checked out the general stores. And they decided on gunpowder because they thought the gunpowder in the stores was of pretty poor, inferior quality. So while they looked for land for the family business, the son of the family, here he is, E.I. DuPont. He went to Germany and was learning all the new techniques and buying all the equipment necessary to make gunpowder. So they set up the gunpowder works on the banks of the Brandywine River in Wilmington and started production in 1802. And they kept up production there until 1922. So in the 1800s, it was all explosives for DuPont. It was gunpowder, dynamite, and nitroglycerin. With dynamite, a lot of people don't know this. 80% of the dynamite used to open up the West, to build all those railroad tunnels, they had to blast through the Rockies. All that, 80% of that dynamite was made by DuPont. They had a license to manufacture from Alfred Nobel. Nitroglycerin, that's how Pierre lost his father. Lamont was running a nitroglycerin plant in Rancocas, New Jersey, and the place went up. So they said that when they found Lamont, he was buried under a big pile of sand, not a mark on him. So it must have been the concussion. But I think Pierre would have been a very different person if his father had lived. His father had some funny ideas. For one, Pierre liked to play the piano. But his father thought that that was strictly for women and wouldn't allow him to play the piano. So once Pierre was making his own decisions, then when he went to college, he went to MIT. He had a piano rented in his dorm room. So not too bad. EI stands for Eleuther Irénée DuPont. Those are names that run all through the DuPont family. A lot of tradition in the DuPont family. Governor Pete DuPont's sons, he had one named Elliot Thayer. He's on the board of trustees of Longwood. They call him Thayer for short. And Pete's other son is named Ben. So there we go. This is where they made the gunpowder. This is Hagley Mills in Wilmington. What you'll notice about these houses, these are the houses where they would grind the materials. Three sides are made of stone, and the side facing the river is made of wood. So that when it explodes, and it did often, it would all blow into the river. The Brandywine River there is in the background. There's a mill race closer to you that would provide water for the water wheels to turn the grinding stones inside the house. That's a very pretty location. Very nice. It's also very good for tours. That's where E.I. lived. His house was called Eleutherian Mills, which I'm told means House of Peace. And the house, if you get a chance to go through it, it's really quite lovely. They have a big car show there every year, including a showing of the DuPont motor car. That was Paul DuPont. Paul did some beautiful cars. Big, long, swoopy fenders. Looked like the car that Cruella de Vil drove in 101 Dalmatians. Beautiful car. But he got bored with cars. So he sold the car company and he bought Indian Motorcycle. And he made motorcycles then for many years. So here we go with Longwood. The patriarch of the family was George Pierce. And when they came to this part of Pennsylvania, they came because they were Quaker. And they'd heard a Quaker colony was being set up. So they bought a parcel of land. They bought 405 acres, and they bought it directly from William Penn. So this Longwood is an original William Penn land grant. It took a while before they had things set up for their farm. They ran a dairy farm there and operated it successfully for over 200 years. But they had to get things set for a dairy farm, for growing crops, because the place was a forest when they got there. So the area that is today the Longwood Meadow, that was all trees. They had to cut down all the trees with axes and saws, haul out the stumps with teams of horses. Backbreaking work. It took 4 years to clear the land so they could plant their corn, grain, alfalfa, hay to take care of the cows. But they finally did, got that all done. In the meantime, they also built themselves a log cabin. And that's where they lived for the first 30 years until they got around to building a house. This is some of the Pierce family. This is the late 1800s here, about 1893, roughly. One thing that you note here is that the house is made of brick. Very unusual for a Pennsylvania colonial farmhouse. The pattern of the brick is called Flemish bond. It's a very familiar pattern. If you've ever been to London, you'll see it all over the place there. Boston, Philadelphia, New York. The Masons did a lot of Flemish bond. It has one brick going lengthwise, and then the next one is has the end sticking out. And the end of that brick is glazed black. So what they were saying in building their house of brick was, we are well-to-do. We are sophisticated. We are city folk. When they got a little money together, they would do an addition to the house. Now, it's easy to date this photograph because the porch that you see there, which is still there, that was an addition in 1823. However, the house, when Pierre got there, still did not have electricity, indoor plumbing, or running water. So that's what it looks like today. That's the old section of the house, built in 1730. Very nice. The family was a little anxious to get under cover and get out of the log cabin. So when they built the foundation and then covered it over with the floor for the first floor, the family immediately moved into the basement. And if you go down there, it's a rabbit warren of little tiny rooms. There are like 10 rooms there. There's an old coal furnace there. And one of the doors in the house that has a combination lock That's down there too. It's the old root cellar, and that's where Pierre kept the liquor. The other door with the combination lock is on the other side of the building where the archives, some of the archives are kept now, and that's where Mrs. DuPont's furs were kept. So very nice. Two of the brothers of the Pierce family, they were twin brothers, Joshua and Samuel, started to put in an arboretum in 1798. This is Joshua. They were twins. So there we go. Just have a look at the portrait there and just see what the other would look like as well. They gathered trees from all over the colonies, from Virginia up through New York. These were all native trees, native to the colonies, and they brought them back, usually on horseback. Sometimes they would ride all night with the tree in a saddlebag if it was particularly hot, so that way they could keep it moist so that it would survive the trip back to Longwood. And they planted lots and lots of trees. This is what the Arboretum looked like. When they got everything planted and filled out, the Arboretum was 15 acres. But you'll notice too, all the trees are really close together. To my mind, everything was planted way too close together. The trees were planted 10 feet apart. And between each tree was a boxwood bush. So it was tree, boxwood. It was just, you can see how dense it is. There's just no room for anything to grow. So over the years, if a tree was knocked down by a windstorm or hit by lightning, Longwood did not replace it because the other trees needed the room to grow. This was called Pierce's Park. It became quite a big tourist attraction in the area. It hit its prime in the 1850s. There's some of the many trees that were planted on the property. The big trees in the middle of this picture, only one is still there. The tree on the right was a cucumber magnolia, and that succumbed to a windstorm early in 2020. Much to my sadness, I just loved that tree. Both of those trees were planted in 1800. And the tree on the right, the cucumber magnolia, was a gift to the Pierce family from a famous Philadelphia botanist named John Bartram. In Philadelphia, you see Bartram Avenue, Bartram High School, same guy. He was royal botanist to King George III. The other tree, which is the one that's still there, it's a ginkgo. And if you want to put a ginkgo in your yard, this is the one you want. This is a male ginkgo. The female ginkgo, it's a pretty tree, but it produces a seed pod that stinks to high heaven. So we try and clean those up. We'll rake them up. Otherwise, people walking past will inquire who got sick. But there are some people who will come out, frequently Asian people, and they'll bring plastic bags with them. And they'll be down on hands and knees, picking up all the seed pods. I'm told they can make a medicinal soup from it. I can't imagine how awful that must smell or taste. But for some people, if it doesn't smell and taste really bad, it's not doing you enough good. Also, there's a famous dish in China, ginkgo nuts chicken. And just a week ago, I saw an episode of Yan Can Cook, and he was doing ginkgo nuts chicken. I've never tasted ginkgo nuts, so I don't know what they taste like, but very popular in China. In the middle of the 1800s is when the Arboretum hit its stride. It was at its best looking, most popular, and this is the gentleman who took care of it, George Washington Pierce. He had a great love of trees, and everything was very shipshape and kept up very well. So he was the last one in the family who really cared about the trees. The younger folk who came along after that really didn't have much interest in trees, and the Arboretum fell into some disrepair. But this is a Christmas card. This is late 1800s. Snow on the ground. Oh, it's a very pretty scene. Gotta like that. This is the large lake down by the Italian Water Garden. It was a little larger then, and there were a lot of things you could do down there. You could rent a boat. Out on the boat, hunt around, row around with your sweetie on a nice sunny afternoon. People would come out, bring their picnic basket and a large blanket, spread that out, So if the kids would have something to play on, have lunch there. There were a lot of croquet courts there. That's one reason why there's a lot of boxwood on the property. Pierre loved boxwood, but the Pierce brothers did too. And boxwood has a very hard and dense wood. And the twins, Joshua and Samuel, and the brothers after that, would hand carve their own mallets and balls to play croquet. So not bad. There was also a bathhouse there. And when Pierre took over the property, the nieces and nephews who would come to visit, they were welcome to swim in the large lake, but only if an adult was present. Here you can really see how close together all of these trees are. It was called Pierce's Park because a park is a very old English design. A row of trees down either side and then grass down the middle. In the large manor houses of England, the parks would be hundreds of acres, still are. That's where the master would ride horses. He would go hunting for deer, pheasant, grouse. So very pretty. Some of those old boxwoods are still there, believe it or not. If you go down the row of trees to the left, some of the 1800 boxwoods are still on the property. They are something. So, Pierre Dupont is born 1870. Just to put the family tree in line for you, E.I. Dupont, the founder of DuPont Powder, was this Pierre's great-grandfather. So, interesting fellow. Pierre this is after he had bought the Longwood property. This is about 1910, roughly. Looks very distinguished. He was a very interesting fellow, I think. But here he is as a youngster, very young man. And he was born in Wilmington. This is the garden of the family home. The house was called Nemours. Now, it's not the Nemours that you see today. That was the home of Alfred I. DuPont. This home is that lane across from the DuPont Country Club, if you've ever been by there. It goes back under the trees, and the house is down on the banks of the Brandywine River. And Pierre described the fountain in the garden. He said it was about the size of a knitting needle. And there it is right in the middle. Pierre loved fountains. This picture is a Machinery Hall at the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. That was in Fairmount Park in 1876. And our Pierre was 6 years old. The family went to the fair, and Pierre discovered all these pumps and jets of water. At one end of the room, as you can see, there's a 40-foot waterfall. He absolutely captivated. And from then on, whenever he had a chance to see fountains, he would go. World's Fair, the opening of the Eiffel Tower, family trip to Europe, they went to Versailles. He saw lots of beautiful fountains. And he was captivated from that time on when he was 6 years old. Here he is a little later. This is after he lost his father. That's Pierre on the right. He is 16. And after his father passed away, Pierre became the male head of the family. His brothers and sisters, as you can see, there were a lot of them, they called him Dad. And so it was for the rest of his life. And he would look after them. He took that role very seriously. So he's getting all set to have a productive life. This is his mother's house in Wilmington. This is called St. Amour. Oh, I love that name. St. Amour, big rambling Victorian place. If you're familiar with Wilmington, this house was across the street from Tower Hill School. It was torn down in 1972, and it's where the Tower Hill School athletic fields are today. So that's the side that it was on. I remember the house when I was growing up. So always wondered who lived there. Well, nobody was living there at that time. Pierre inherited the house, but he could have cared less about owning a big house. So he immediately sold it to one of his brothers. So trees, that's what Pierre really cared about. That's why he bought the Longwood property, a country place. Yes, indeed. In 1905, the Pierce family moved out, and a lady owned the property at that point, and she announced plans to clear cut the whole property, cut down all the trees, turn them into boards for houses. Pierre had visited Pierce's Park many times, and he thought that was a terrible idea. cut down all those beautiful native trees. They were over 100 years old by that time. That's why they had monetary value, is because they were large and you could make a lot of money with the boards. So what he did, he bought out the contract to the lumber company, and then to make sure the trees would be safe, he bought the farm. He bought 202 acres. The farm had been cut in half by that time, half to a daughter, half to a son as wedding gifts. So 202 acres, the house, there was a barn, that's where the open air theater is today, and various outbuildings. And for that property, Pierre paid $15,500. Market value for the day. Pierre had no shortage of money at that point. He graduated from MIT with a degree in chemistry in 1890. And in 1893, after he went to work for the family firm, he had his first big invention. Pierre was co-inventor of smokeless gunpowder. There was a smokeless gunpowder formula in France, but DuPont wanted their own proprietary formula. So Pierre and his cousin Francis, who had an estate in Centerville called Owl's Nest, they worked together and came up with it. Pierre's laboratory, by the way, was at what they today call the DuPont Chambers Works, right next to the Delaware Memorial Bridge on the New Jersey side. So he would leave from his mother's house, ride down to the Delaware River and take a ferry across the river. And he was putting so much time into developing this new formula that he had a cot moved into the lab so he could sleep there overnight. And Pierre made plenty of money from it. DuPont Company did too, but Pierre did as well because Pierre kept the patent. You don't get to do that today, but he did. And he thought all good things were going to come from developing smokeless gunpowder. He thought, well, there'd be a title, there'd be a raise, you know, the corner office with a tree, a secretary, and a credenza. Nothing from the company at all. And Pierre got tired of hitting his head against a brick wall, so he resigned, left DuPont, and he moved to Lorain, Ohio, because he had inherited a controlling interest in the Lorain Steel Company. So he went out there to run that firm. They made rails for railroads. And it was a lucky break that he did, because the manager of that plant was an expert in industrial efficiency. And Pierre learned his lessons well. So in 1903, he got a phone call from his cousin, T.C., Thomas Coleman DuPont. And T.C. said, hey, the family is getting ready to sell. They want to get out of the gunpowder business. They're going to sell to one of our biggest competitors in gunpowder. And they won't sell to myself and Alfred I, but they will sell if you come in as treasurer. So you want to join the two of us and buy the company? Pierre thought for about 30 seconds and said, I'm on my way. Came back to Wilmington. 1903, the three cousins bought DuPont Company from the family for $12 million. So Pierre was treasurer, Alfred I was vice president, T. Coleman DuPont was president. And they started to expand immediately. New product lines all over the place, chemicals, paints, finishes. And that's when you started to see some wealth coming into the DuPont family. And of course, they were still making gunpowder. DuPont gunpowder has been used in every war that America has been involved in since 1812. But they were about to have a huge profitable war, World War I. The gunpowder that DuPont made serviced not only the US troops, but also all of our allies. And DuPont made about $350 million in profits from the gunpowder. And immediately they were raked over the coals by a couple of congressmen, one of whom coined the catchy phrase merchant of death, and called Pierre in for hearing after hearing. And Pierre was politically naive. So eventually he came out on top. But that must have been terrible to go through. So anyway, in the meantime, he's trying to think, what am I going to do with this farm that I just bought? He had no intention of living there. He never did live there full time. Longwood was his weekend place and his summer house. And It was a very nice place. Well, after Pierre fixed it up a little bit. In 1907, he decided to start to build some gardens. So this is his plan for the first garden. It's called Flower Garden Walk. It's in back to the open air theater. The garden is 600 feet long. Here's construction. 600 feet long, and there's a fountain right in the middle. This is what it originally looked like. The path in the middle was not brick at that time. It was crushed oyster shells and clam shells. So it looked like white gravel. Pierre described it as an old-fashioned garden with straight lines and box borders. Of course, the box borders are long gone, but the straight lines are all still there. There's the fountain in the middle. This was Longwood's first fountain. So Pierre got to indulge in his love of fountains. The water for the fountain, by the way, came from the large lake down by the Italian water garden. And the pump that they had down there is one very familiar to farmers in the 1800s. It was called a hydraulic ram. It ran on water power. The water would go down a pipe, and then you'd hear the shoom, and the water would be pumped up toward the house. They had a cistern on the second floor of the estate house, and that's where the water went. Then when they wanted to turn on the fountain, all they had to do was open a spigot, and the water would run downhill from the house to power the fountain. The fountain is not as deep as it was at that time. This is where a lot of the nieces and nephews of Pierre would splash and swim and frolic and have a good time on a summer's day. And at that time, it was about 4 feet deep. But if it were that deep today, under Pennsylvania law, it would be classified as a swimming pool, and we'd have to put a fence around it. Lots of pretty flowers out there, and they've been expanding Flower Garden Walk ever since. The berm on the other side, it didn't used to be there. Back at the early part of the 20th century, that was a 9-hole golf course where the visitor center and the parking lot is today, because Mrs. DuPont liked to play golf. Employees did too. So they would play there. They'd have their own employee tournaments. Sounds like a lot of fun. This is also at Flower Garden Walk. Those silver balls, that was a very common lawn decoration at the time. You'll still see them from time to time. There was a ball like that outside Alfred's barn, north of Wilmington, and that area is today still called Blue Ball. So Flower Garden Walk was Pierre's big project for 1907. This was one of his big projects for 1908. He did 3 gardens right next to each other, surrounded by arborvitae hedge. And he was experimenting with what he called garden rooms. This has a maze in it. That is gone today. This is now the peony garden. You can see a lot of peonies are in there. Next to that is the square fountain garden, and then a garden of old wisteria. Very pretty stuff. So in 1909, Pierre started a series of garden parties. This is his plan to entertain his friends, fix up the farm and entertain his friends. So for the very first garden party, he invited 350 of his very closest friends, brought them out for a day of peerless food and drink, music for dining and dancing, and of course, entertainment. But for the first couple of years, they just had to do the entertainment on the lawn. And he thought there must be something better than this. Well, they found something better than this on one of their trips to Europe. This is in Florence, Italy, and he found a little outdoor theater, what he called an open air theater. And he thought, wow, this is great. We'll build an open air theater. And he did. It debuted for the garden party in 1914. So this is the original open air theater they found in Italy. The young lady to Pierre's left is his future wife, Alice. The year of this is 1913, by the way. The lady on the right is Pierre's sister, Louisa. She was the chaperone for the trip. So this is what they did. At that time, the lawn in front of the theater was flat. Today, of course, it has a nice slope to it. But back then it was flat, and they set up all these tables so folks could have their dessert and coffee and sit there and enjoy the entertainment. And Pierre would hire from the local vaudeville circuit for the entertainment. Singers, dancers, jugglers, ventriloquists, you name it. They all came through. That was a good time. For the first garden party, he had ladies in diaphanous outfits. The local newspaper was enchanted. Oh, look at that, dancing up a storm, in bare feet yet. And they had fountains on the stage. But this is early on. You'll notice there's an arborvitae wing to the place, a hedge around the stage, with, of course, places cut in the stage so actors could move on and off, or dancers or whoever was performing. And at that time, the fountains were operated by foot treadles to the right of the orchestra pit. And you needed to have a lot of weight to stand on that pedal and make them operate. And the kids called it fountain dancing. They would have to jump up and down on it to get it to work. So it worked very well. Here's another view of it with the fountains going. This is before he renovated the theater and added to it mightily. And then he decided, well, we need to expand the house, bring it up to date. So he put in electricity, indoor plumbing, and running water. Yay. So we could have all the basics there in the house. Now, as you look at the house, the old Pierce family home is to the right. Then Pierre added the rest of it, the home conservatory and the wing on the left in 1914. Pierre didn't stay out there all that often. That was his weekend place and summer house, as I mentioned. But when he was in residence there, those 3 windows on the second floor, that was his bedroom. That was the master suite for Pierre. So the window to the right and in the middle, that was the bedroom. Very plainly furnished. I think the furniture came from J.D. Van Sciver. Just the same kind of furniture that you would buy for your home. It has very simple tastes. The window in the corner on the left, that was his bathroom. And he had a nice shower in there. That's what he preferred. And there's a nice 1914 rain head in there. So it must have been a nice, comfortable shower. That ivy has been there for years and years. The Japanese yew down at the foot of that by the French doors, which is the library, that's getting kind of big. I would expect that to be cut back just any day now. So there's Pierre and Alice all dressed up to go to their garden party. Kind of outfit that you'd have on to have a fun time at the garden party. Ladies, is that what you wear today? I'm sure it was comfortable. Alice was an interesting person. She loved horticulture, beautiful things, and loved to travel. So good match for our Pierre. This is the home conservatory. And the reason Pierre built this is because his main residence was in Wilmington. And he thought winters in Delaware were kind of gray and drab. And he thought, wouldn't it be nice to wake up to a little bit of color every once in a while, some blossoms, some green. So that's why he built this. His legal residence, by the way, was a 2-bedroom suite in the Hotel DuPont in downtown Wilmington on the 9th floor. The suite has been remodeled since, and it's just regular guest rooms now. But it was a good thing for Pierre, because when he got up in the morning, shower and shave, call room service, had breakfast sent up. He favored omelets, by the way. And then all he had to do was walk down the hall, because his office was also on the 9th floor. And the hallway would go right into the Brandywine building. So there he was. So the conservatory today looks very much as it did in Mr. DuPont's day. And he was thrilled with the way it turned out. He was very happy, so happy, in fact, that it gave him the courage to go ahead and do the big conservatory. But he had to wait a few years, because America was in the middle of World War I at this time. And Longwood could not get either the men nor the materiel to build a big conservatory like that in 1915. So he had to wait until 1919, and that's when construction began. And that began the big grand style of gardening. Here's the conservatory going up under construction. The shed in the front is an equipment shed, a material shed. That's no longer there, but the rest of it certainly is. There are cranes there, lots of workmen, and all the workmen and the machinery are property of the Longwood Construction Company, owned by Pierre Pont. But of course, so that way he get contractor discounts. This is the exhibition hall going up. Lots and lots of scaffolding. My goodness. Those windows on the right, that's where the East Conservatory is now. And the wall at the end, that's the music room these days. The music room was the first addition to the conservatory, built in 1923. So if you look down at the end, this is after 1923. So the music room is there, but the East Conservatory didn't come along until 1929. So out the windows, you can see sunlight, and there was lawn outside at that time. The exhibition hall, most of the time, has water on the floor. The purpose of that is to humidify the Australian tree ferns, which are always kept there, and frequently a lot of beautiful flowers. The display changes from time to time. By the way, it's getting set to change again. September 30th, the Chrysanthemum Festival opens at Longwood. So that'll be a lot of fun. One thing that I should mention in regard to that, chrysanthemums is one of Longwood's core collections. Longwood has the largest chrysanthemum collection in North America. We grow all 123 varieties, lots of beautiful, beautiful flowers. The first core collection was the native trees, the arboretum. And this also speaks to the stewardship of the land, because Pierre came in and promised when he bought it, I'm going to take care of these trees. I will nurture them. I will protect them. And I will make sure that they are all in good health. And so it is today. So 2 core collections right there. The staff lived in these tenant houses, which are on the north side of the property. The road on the far left of the slide is Route 926. Today, we call this line of houses Student Row. Longwood has a number of college students who live on site studying botany and various other things. It's a program in conjunction with the University of Delaware. So when they're accepted in whatever class they're in, they get a free ride. Longwood pays the tuition, any classroom fees, pays for their textbooks, and gives them a house to live in, one of these houses. They may share the house with 2 or 3 other people, but what the heck? It's free, and they get a stipend to run the house because college kids need pizza. Well, they also had the thrill of a lifetime when they had to stay in those houses and not go outside because of all the recent excitement that was there. So a lot of these houses are still there. So let's move along a little bit. This is the Villa Gambaria in Italy. This was one of the inspirations for the Italian water garden. There in the middle of the picture, you can see a couple of pooches.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some happy dogs. One big difference between Longwood's Italian water garden and the Villa Gambaria is the Longwood fountain garden has many more fountains than this beautiful fountain garden does. And here's Pierre's plan for it. By the way, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Pierre designed all the gardens at Longwood himself. Interesting guy. What's also interesting to me is that even though his family background is French, all the gardens are Italian-made. Every darn one of them. I guess that's just what spoke to him. So here he is figuring everything out, including the hydraulic calculations. And there's an interesting story behind this. Pierre and Alice were coming back from Europe. Their favorite ship to travel on was the Mauritanian, one of those big old coal-fired steamers. The sister ship to the Mauritania, by the way, was the Lusitania. Might have heard of that one. Anyway, Pierre spent 5 of the 6 days of the voyage in his cabin doing the hydraulic calculations for the Italian water garden. And these are his calculations right here, working with a pencil and a slide rule. This is what he came up with. And when the computer era came in, Longwood checked all his figures with the computer, and they were all right on the money. So here we go. We're building the Italian water garden in 1925, and it opened in 1926. So where we're standing, where this picture was taken, is the overlook. So you get a nice overview of the garden. Down each side are trees, little leaf linden. And if you've been down there, you'll notice the trees are square cut. That's a technique called pollarding. It's just a formal way of presenting the tree. Under those trees are round fountains. And that was an addition from Mrs. DuPont. She'd seen fountains like that at the Alhambra in Spain and told her husband, oh, I think that would be a good idea. And, okay, dear. So he put them in. And in the middle, you have a fountain, a round fountain, and 4 pools. And I think Pierre's plan for the 4 pools is here too. Well, this is an overview, lots of boxwoods. But as you look at this, and there's a later picture of it here too, there's one thing that you won't see in this fountain garden.
Dogs.
Flowers. No flowers, it's all green. Because Pierre didn't want the flowers to compete with the water. He wanted the water to be the main feature. But that was an excellent guess. Very good. Here's the fountain in the center. It's a lot of fun. Part of the Italian water garden system is this fountain at the end of Pierce's Park. It's called the Sylvan Fountain. And back in the day, just inside the Pierce DuPont house, there was a switch on the wall. And if Mrs. DuPont was having the girls out for lunch or tea or mahjong, whatever the case may be, all she had to do was flip the switch and the fountains would go on. Just like the fountains at your place. So back to the open air theater. Things had worked out so well, Pierre decided to redo it and expand it. And you can see the fountains are already on the stage. And now we're seeing the stairs being put in the middle to lead to an upper level. But you see there's a lot of construction in the back there, what is today a grassy lawn. That's because under that hill is where Pierre built all the dressing rooms. The dressing rooms, there are dressing rooms for 100 people down there, including 3-star dressing rooms. So it's a lot of fun. Under the stage is where all the pumps are for the fountains. There are also lights there for the fountains. Here's a good view of it. Now we have fountains on 2 levels, the lower level and of course beyond that gate. Very pretty. So this is the opening of the open air theater. I believe these are all members of the Longwood Fire Company. And Pierre's there in front and center, an auspicious occasion. And this is what it looks like today. So if you come in, you can see a fountain show there. The open air theater does the even hours. So 10, 12, 2, and 4. And the shows are all at quarter after the hour. Very pretty. The open air theater has a lot of shows. We do Broadway musicals in there. That's done by a local theater company called the Brandywiners. The Brandywiners were started by a nephew of Pierre, a gentleman named Chick Laird, who was a very nice man. I knew Chick when I was growing up. We went to the same church. It was Christ Church in Greenville. And I didn't know who he was. I just knew he was a member of the family. But he was a very nice fellow. And the Brandywiners started to perform shows there in 1932. Their production this year was Oliver. Fun show. I think this production is South Pacific. Gonna wash that man right out of my hair. This strikes me as being the Mikado. There's a company called the Savoy Company from Philadelphia. They've been coming to Longwood, to the open air theater, the longest. They started performing there in 1916. And they've been doing an annual show there ever since. And their show this summer was The Pirates of Penzance. So on to fountains. Pierre loved his colored fountains, just loved it. He had several ideas for the fountain garden, and I'll get to those in just a moment. But first, this is what it looked like before the fountains went in. Now, the conservatory was finished in 1921, and Pierre had to decide, what am I going to do with this plot out in front, which originally was a cornfield. He didn't want to leave it as a cornfield because up against his grand conservatory, it looked a little plain. So he turned this into a 5-acre garden, put in a lot of boxwoods. You can see some rows of trees there. The trees he planted there were Norway maple. Over to the left, that's the idea garden today. Back then, that was a grove of fruit trees. If you look at the back of the picture, you can see greenhouses on the backside of the conservatory, but the production greenhouses aren't there yet. They didn't come along for a few years. So he sat there looking at this garden that he was putting in and thinking, still not quite right. What am I going to do with this? So he thought about it for a while. In the meantime, he was thinking about the influences, the things that he wanted to recreate in the fountain garden. This is the Columbian Exposition of 1893 in Chicago. And there they had what they called the Grand Canal. All these lights festooned on the buildings. Must have been quite a sight. All the electric lights were supplied by George Westinghouse. He beat out Thomas Edison for the contract. For the Grand Canal, that's where the fountains were. And the big innovation that year was they had fountains lit from underneath with brilliantly colored electric lights that had never been seen before. People had seen lights shining onto fountains, but not coming up through the fountains. And it's a whole different thing. So Pierre made sure that he put those in. So here he is putting in the fountains. This is what we call the upper canal at Longwood. We have three canals, three lines of fountains now. And with the renovation that we've done on the main fountain garden, under each line of fountains is a pump room and a reservoir. So the water doesn't have far to go to be shown to the public. And there they are. The fountains are on. This is once again the upper canal that's closest to the conservatory. The stonework is all Italian limestone. This came from Italy and was quarried and carved by a company called Olivati. They're still there. So if Longwood ever needs to replace any of these stones, they are readily available. Thank goodness for that. This is what it looked like back in the day. The water would run in the upper canal and then come through these scuppers into a catch basin below. And down below, you can see bouquets of flowers done in stone. And other small planters. On the lower left, you can see a semicircular planting bed. They usually have some ivy or something like that in there. Pierre's plans for this is the center of the main fountain garden. See, in the middle, he wanted to put a boxwood, and he finally found a big boxwood. There it is. This boxwood had sprouted in England in the 1700s and then was brought across the Atlantic and planted at a farm near Lancaster. And it was enormous, just huge. And Pierre was able to buy it and have it brought in. You can see on the front of the truck, it says Valentine. The company was called Lewis and Valentine. And they specialized in transplanting large plants, large trees, large bushes, and Pierre gave them lots and lots of business. So here's the boxwood planted in the middle of the main fountain garden. There it is in resplendent glory. And it stayed there for some years. Unfortunately, in the mid-50s, we had a big blizzard, and the heavy snow broke it to bits. So it had to be taken out. Darn, darn, darn. But it was so pretty. This is what we call the pump house facade. All across the front here are fountains, Gorgon's heads, I call them, heads of Bacchus, Roman gods, that kind of thing. And I just loved that when I was growing up. Unfortunately, it stopped working years ago. And it wasn't until we redid the main fountain garden that we got it going again. Here's Lewis and Valentine bringing some more plants in. Brought in tons and tons of plants. Not only for the main fountain garden, but also oak and conifer knoll, which is in back of the main fountain garden and in back of the chimes tower. Some of the trees they brought in, the biggest tree was 70 feet tall. Just huge. And I mentioned originally this was a cornfield, and that's what it looked like. You notice there's a big tree in the upper right. The Pierce brother, who was farming this land, marked the corners of his cornfield with mulberry trees. I have no idea why, but that's what he did. So once he developed the main fountain garden, this is what it looked like. The fountains were really quite lovely, but not seen by very many people at that time. The public would come into the gardens on weekends. Actually, the gardens were open to the public for the very first day Pierre owned it in 1906, because people had been coming in to see the Arboretum all through the 1800s, and Pierre saw no reason to stop that. This is more what it looks like today. This is before the remodeling of this portion of the conservatory. But more on that in just a couple of minutes. This is the pump house. These are all the original pumps from 1929. That's when they were manufactured and brought in, and the main fountain garden went online in 1931. Now, closest to us are air compressors. Then the pumps are all around it in the back. These pumps were made by General Electric in Rochester, New York. And on each of the pedestals where the pumps are, there's a plaque that tells you where the water from that pump went. Of course, back then it was, where does the water go? And this is where it went. This is what we call the rectangular basin. These are all the big jets of water on the top of the main fountain garden. Beautiful lights up there. The lights are 18-inch lights with colored gels on the top. Glass gels, of course. The gel would be the theatrical term for it, a colored covering. At that time, the lights were either on or off. No fading out of the lights. And the lights were powered by locomotive headlight bulbs. Very pretty. And in back of that, the chimes tower. You saw the hillside where the cornfield was. All they did was dig into the hillside there. And when the rock was exposed to the air, it hardened. And they used that rock to build that chimes tower, 61 feet tall. The design of it is based on the design of an old tower, a medieval tower at one of the Beelan family estates in France. Alice Dupont, her maiden name was Beelan. So it was in the family. There's a look at it today with the waterfall next to it. Things have grown up nicely around it. And during the summer, if we're having a carillon concert, then after the carillon concert, you can go up to the top and see the bells. Okay, we're in the conservatory now. This is from 1929, and this is the room that Pierre built for his big fancy parties, the ballroom. The table that you see there was made especially for the ballroom. The table is 70 feet long, and it's solid mahogany. Weighs a ton. Thank goodness it's sectional, so otherwise you'd never be able to pick the thing up. And it's always kept in storage. I've only seen it put up, assembled once, and that was for Longwood Centennial in 2006. At the top is the curved rose glass ceiling, glass etched with Art Deco designs, very pretty. It used to have a greenhouse roof over it, so the sunlight would come in through the rose glass, which must have been very pretty. But Pierre didn't want to have to count on Mother Nature for the light. So he took out the greenhouse roof and put in lights. So he could just turn the lights on and that would shine through the rose glass. The other lights that are in there, the chandeliers and the wall sconces, Pierre got a special deal on that from a firm in New York, $10,500 for the whole package. I have no idea what it would be worth today. Here's another view. They're all set up for some sort of dinner or activity of some kind. When Pierre was having a luncheon for a flower society or social society, more often than not, they'd serve chicken salad. Okay, organ. This gentleman is named Furman Swinnett. He came to Longwood from Sweden, and he was Pierre DuPont's personal organist for 32 years. This is the original keyboard to that giant organ. It is a giant organ. It's a 1929 Aeolian, by far the largest organ Aeolian ever built. And this gentleman designed the organ. And he would do a big rehearsal, let me get the right word, recital, every Sunday afternoon. He would play for 3 hours. And he did that for years and years. Here's some of the pipes of the organ, getting ready to be installed at Longwood. These are the bass notes. The bass pipes are all made of wood. They're made from sugar pine. The deepest note, you can see that all the way on the left. These pipes are all still there at Longwood. The deepest note is, the pipe is 33 feet tall and 3 feet square. And the organist tells me it's a note that you more feel than hear. Because if you hear it, it sounds like whoa, 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 whoa. That very deep note. The room sort of shakes. The organ at Longwood is what you would call an orchestral organ because it mimics all the sounds of the orchestra. It even has percussion, snare drums, bass drums, kettle drums, marimba, xylophone, bells. It's all in there. All the bells and whistles, it's literally all there. That is fun. So now that the fountain garden has been put in, this is what everything looked like. In back of the conservatory, where today you would see greenhouses, they have yet to be built. Those didn't come until later. On the left, where the idea garden is, you can see fruit trees. And on the right, where the topiary garden is, that hasn't been built yet. That didn't come along until 1936. Here's a painting of the gardens, Pierre and Alice at the foreground. Fountain, some of the highlights of the place. Private to public. The last thing that Pierre worked on was, it was called the sundial garden at that time. And he installed what they called an anelomatic sundial. And once you figured the thing out, it's accurate to within 5 minutes. Great big sundial. Today, it's the topiary garden. In 1958, they brought in a lot of beautiful shrubs and bushes from an estate on Long Island. Some in geometric shapes, some in animal shapes. And this is Pierre being congratulated by the ambassador to France. He was presented with the Legion of Honor in 1954. Pierre was not in good health at this time. And as a matter of fact, 3 days after he received this award, he passed away. In 1954, he was 84 years old. But interesting fellow, interesting fellow. The Legion of Honor, the award, is on display at the Pierce DuPont House. So if you'd like to see it, just head on over there. He is buried at Hagley Museum. There's a family plot there. So his wife Alice is there, and EI is there. So he's not buried at Longwood. So the new director became Russell Siebert. He was looking after things along with the staff, the employees. Back in the 1930s, a newspaper reporter asked Mr. DuPont, how many people work at Longwood? And Pierre said about half. It's a little larger today. So what we're all about is educating the public. This is the original visitor center. It was on the west side of the conservatory. The parking lot was not large. I remember my father going in there and circling like a shark, waiting for a parking space to open up. He would finally find one. This was the desert room that later became the Cascade Garden. It was on the far west side of the conservatory. A beautiful thing. The new Cascade Garden is being built right now. Tropical terrace, planting plants, keeping records of plants, and doing research. By the way, at this point in the conservatory, the uniform for gardeners was a long sleeve white shirt and a tie. Catch the gardeners wearing something like that today. So this is one of the books about Longwood and the plants, written by a gentleman who's no longer there, Tomasz Anishko, fascinating fellow. He would go out and do some of Longwood's expeditions to South America, to Brazil, to other countries to bring back plants. And one of the things he brought back were water lilies from the Amazon. This was the original water lily garden in 1957. So this was several years after Mr. DuPont passed away, so he never got to see this garden. We took good care of it, Pierre. In the center, that's where we have the Longwood hybrid water platter. Those are the plants with the really big leaves. Over the course of the summer, they get to 7 feet across. Here's a young lady standing on one. Boy, you really got to be careful to do that. I'm sure she's standing on plexiglass. Otherwise, the leaf would fold up and down she would go. This and a picture of a young girl, we used to have postcards of that in the visitor center. There are those big leaves. And that's the gardener who came up with it, a gentleman named Pat Nutt, N-U-T-T, Pat Nutt. He came to us from England after World War II, and he stayed with Longwood almost 65 years. Very nice fellow. And another book by Tomasz Anishko on water lilies. Here we are getting trees ready for oak and conifer knoll and the topiary garden. There we go, there's the topiaries. So when the topiary garden was complete, for Pierre, the gardens were finished. He had done his work. So after that, in 1937, Longwood was turned into a nonprofit foundation so that it would always be open to the public. And then when Pierre passed away in 1954, he made provisions for an endowment for Longwood. So that would help to keep the place going. And that is still in place. Also, his will funded the Longwood Foundation, which handled Pierre's charitable giving. And that's still around, handing things out as well. Most of their educational, most of the grants that they give are educational in nature, but they also do grants for some capital projects. They've helped with some of Longwood's projects. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. Longwood is still expanding. As you know, recently they bought Grenoble, which was Irénée DuPont's estate. Longwood does not have plans for the estate. They bought it to preserve the open space. At the moment, Grenoble is being farmed, and it will continue to be farmed. Longwood has no plans to turn that into Longwood 2. What they're going to do with the house, I really don't know. They're still formulating plans, and I don't know where that's going to go. But they just wanted to preserve the open space. And they also buy land as a buffer against development. They just bought Gaylor Vineyards to the north of Longwood, and that's to have a further buffer against housing and other development encroaching. So I see I've run out of time here. My goodness. Yeah, I see that. I see that. If you have any questions, I would love to entertain some questions. Yes, Bill.
Is the story about Mrs. DuPont's bridge correct? Was she deaf?
Mrs. DuPont was mostly deaf.
And she built the bridge over the road so she wouldn't get hit by a car?
That is correct. Yeah, that path there was called Doe Run Road back in the day, and it carried cars through the Longwood Gardens out to Route 1. That was their route from the house to the conservatory. And Pierre didn't want to have his wife worry about not hearing a car coming on Doe Run Road. So he built her a bridge over the road. That's the bridge in front of the restaurant.
Right, it goes from restaurant to East Conservatory.
That is correct. Yep, goes to the East Conservatory. That was built in 1923. So good question. Yes, sir.
The Italian garden, something I found really interesting is the way he sized it for perspective to where the two back ponds are bigger than the two front ponds.
That is correct. Yes, he wanted the perspective to be viewed from the overlook. So as you recall, there are 4 little pools around the circular fountain. The far pools furthest away from the overlook are 14 feet longer than the others, so that from the overlook, they all appear to be the same size. It's an optical illusion. Yeah, very smart guy. And yes, ma'am.
I had heard that he got that concept from Versailles. Is that how?
That he got the what from Versailles?
The concept of the way the ponds in the back are larger.
Oh, well, quite right.
What they did in Versailles? Because when I was there, they said mentioning something.
He went to Versailles just before his senior year in college.
Yeah.
So it would have been 1889. The whole family went over. Mom, 10 kids and 2 maids. What a group that would have been. Cacophony. And they visited Versailles. Pierre just loved Versailles. He bought a handbook while he was there. And that handbook is on display in the Pont House Museum.
You said when they first immigrated from France to Rhode Island.
Yes.
What prompted them to leave Rhode Island and come to Delaware?
They were looking for a place where they would be flowing water. Since they decided on gunpowder, they knew they had to have mills to grind that. So they came south and they found the banks of the Brandywine River at Wilmington. And that's where they put the establishment. Yes, sir.
Was DuPont sued under antitrust? They were making their cars or something. And
well, that was Paul DuPont. He was a relative, but not involved with DuPont Company.
okay.
And as I mentioned, he sold the car company because he got bored with it, and he bought Indian Motorcycle and went on from there. The family sort of disapproved of him building cars anyway. Question back here. Yes.
Yes,
Oh, yes, sir.
all the construction on the west side right now, what's that all about?
That's a new West Conservatory and a lot of new greenhouses. The construction should be finished by fall of 2024. On the front of the conservatory, the lower level is being redone and a new overlook, a new terrace is being built on top of that. Down below is going to be the new 1906 room, new restaurant. So the current 1906 room, that seats a little over 70. The new restaurant will seat over 200. The other part of that is an activity/event space. So if we have the Longwood Rotary coming in, that's where they could meet. We'll rent that out for parties, receptions. The only thing we don't do at Longwood is weddings. When Pierre wrote the charter and turned it into a nonprofit foundation, he specifically excluded weddings. He thought it would be too much of a distraction from the horticulture. So it's going to be a lot of fun. The new terrace is coming along very nicely. That's planted with trees now, and they're putting in boxwoods. The trees that are planted up there are yellowwood. Yellowwood is all one word, yellowwood. And they will blossom yellow in the spring. Yes, sir.
How many members?
About 78,000. And that does grow annually. Bill, a follow-up?
Did I get it right that the new visitor center will be on the west end of things?
That's what they're planning. I haven't seen a plan for that yet.
But that's not right this time.
No, they're not doing that immediately. They want to get the conservatory finished first. The conservatory, let me move ahead here. So you can see some of what they are planning here. Christmas displays. That's so beautiful. Oh, this was a favorite of almost everybody, that big table. They did eventually break down toward the end of the display and served a meal there and brought in staff members. My invitation was lost in the mail. Fireworks! Yes, fireworks! You'll be happy to know we are resuming fireworks next year. We'll be doing 6 programs in 2024 and 25. The first program will be July 3rd of next year.
Jim, I think we have Longwood 2 presentation coming up to pick us up from.
Oh, really? Oh.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Those are the production greenhouses that are in back. We have 10 growing houses and about 35,000 square feet of space. Model railroad, that's being set up right now. That'll start operations October 1st. All the kids have such a good time with that. We'll see Thomas the tank engine go by. Hi, Thomas. Hi, Thomas. That's a lot of fun. Oh, the Carillon 2000. This was put into the Chimes Tower. This is a 62 bell Carillon. The bell's custom made for Longwood by a company called Royal Icebouts in Amsterdam. There they are. The big bells, of course, are the bass notes. But we can't have anybody up there while the carillon's being played because these big bells are so loud, they would cause deafness. If I could just go forward here. Construction projects, and we'll get to the new one. Yep, that was Paul Redmond, the new director of Longwood. New children's garden, the tree houses. This tree outside the East Plaza of the conservatory is an English yew. This is a Pennsylvania state champion. And the last tour that I brought by, I pointed it out and said, this is an English yew. It's over 200 years old. And people come from hundreds of miles around to hug this tree. And they said, really? I said, yes, this is our embraceable yew. Oh my goodness. People there for concerts, organ competition, redoing the main fountain garden. I planned for a lot of detail in this talk.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Just need to get to the slides of the new construction. Oh, this is the new production greenhouse on the south side of Route 1. We have a very large nursery over there. This is where we raise all of our chrysanthemums. We also raise all the trees and bushes for the gardens over there. This greenhouse is absolutely enormous. It's 65,000 square feet.
How's this year's Thousand Bloom Month coming along?
Coming along very well.
This one's going to make it?
I don't have a count on it yet. I sure hope so. I sure hope so. It's doing very well so far. The Thousand Blossom Mum is a Japanese art. In Japan, they even have 2,000 blossom mums.
Oh my goodness.
This is what the inside of the greenhouse looks like.
That was pretty cool.
Slow and reimagine. This is what I was looking for. So this is what we're building. New West Conservatory is going to look like it's floating on water. So it'll be very pretty. Lots of walks around it. This is the side view. They're just putting the glass in now. This is what the inside is going to look like. So it'll be very pretty. Lots of trees, lots of flowers, and fountains inside as well. This is what it would look like at night. So pretty. This is the water lily area. As you can see, we're building a colonnade around two sides of that. On the right-hand side of the picture, which is the north side, we've just started to build a new restroom building. That's going in there as well. Lots of walkways will abound. There's a new administration building. In that building, also classrooms for our students.
How many designers were involved in the new construction that's going on right now?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for it. I know we have a main designer for our floral displays. We plan each floral display a year in advance, and the Christmas display is planned 2 years in advance. So they have announced that the theme for this year is Retro Christmas. So that'll be very pretty. And the theme for next year is already on the wall of the design studio, and I refuse to go look. I want to be surprised. So that'll be fun. This is where the restaurant and the event room will be. The event room there on the right, restaurant on the left. The 1906 room at the present restaurant will still be there, but that'll be extra seating for the cafe. So thank you so